Hey everyone, my name is Denver Brunsman. I'm a history professor at George Washington University, and I want to thank you for joining me for this special one-day university session on declaring independence for America's 245th birthday. We're getting closer and closer to 250. And with so many years, it's very easy to take American independence for granted. But as you can see from the title of my lecture, I want to do just the opposite. It was very difficult for the American colonists to break away from Great Britain. Most of the colonists were very proud of their British identity. So independence was anything but inevitable. If you've been part of any of my other sessions with One Day, you know that I try to avoid that word inevitable. I consider that the worst swear word in history. It's so bad, it doesn't just have 4 letters, it has 10 letters. Because, in history, as soon as we deem something inevitable, it really takes away any need for analysis and to think about how and why something took place. And so I want to replace that word with a different one, contingency, 11 letters to outweigh the 10 letters of inevitable. Contingency makes us think about different events and human actions and different possibilities in history. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through the various events that led to America declaring independence. So let's jump right in. And we'll begin by thinking about the British policies that the American colonists resisted. After Britain won the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, in 1763, they began to reform their empire and pass these different acts that really upset the American colonists because they didn't think they were being treated with the proper rights of Englishmen. And so there's so many different policies that were passed in the 1760s and 1770s that it can become quite confusing. And so I divide them into 3 different crises: the Stamp Act crisis, the Townshend Acts crisis, and the Tea Act or Independence crisis. This is also how the American colonists experienced these various events. They weren't necessarily aiming for independence in the 1760s or even in the early 1770s. They really just wanted to solve these immediate problems, particularly the taxes that Parliament had passed, the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. We're going to focus on the 3rd crisis, the Tea Act crisis, because that's what ultimately led to American independence. And I think it helps us to think about the root cause, which, as I teach my students, was sovereignty, or the ultimate control that the colonists would have over their affairs. This certainly included taxes, but it wasn't just limited to taxes. So as much fun as the phrase "no taxation without representation" is to say, we want to think about the broader concept of sovereignty. So in terms of the Tea Act, the person behind that legislation in Britain was the Prime Minister at the time, Frederick North, Lord North. And I love this image of him. He always looks a little bit confused. he had a little bit of trouble, and his real problem in the early 1770s in the British Empire was twofold. On the one hand, the major corporation in Britain at the time, the East India Company, was going bankrupt because it was being undersold by other merchants, particularly Dutch merchants, who traded tea from the East to colonies and other areas in the Western Hemisphere, as well as Europe. And so North had to solve that problem. And he also had the problem of those pesky American colonists. How could he finally get them to obey parliamentary sovereignty? Well, he thought he came up with the perfect plan, a twofer, the Tea Act of 1773. And we're going to look at the provisions of that legislation. The Tea Act repealed the taxes or duties on tea in England at the time. So this had the effect of actually making tea cheaper in England and also throughout the British Empire, including the American colonies. But at the same time, North wanted to establish this principle of parliamentary sovereignty over colonial affairs. So he retained the previous Townshend duty on tea in the American colonies. And at the time, Benjamin Franklin said,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?